I am. My name is Brian Junn. I am the co-writer with Jack Sanderson of She Loves Me Not, and I also directed the first two segments of the movie because it's an anthology piece. Basically, the movie is about a writer named Brady Olinson, and initially Jack and I came up with the idea of separating the story into three chapters to sort of mirror the work of a writer.
Is that another Rex Stevens classic?
I wrote this before you even hit puberty. And yes, some people call it a classic.
You're not gonna read my story, are you, Brady?
It's not about who reads it, Charlotte. It's about the writing. Who cares what I think?
You keep saying you're so miserable. You don't ever talk to me about anything. I mean, even when I ask you, you just avoid it.
Why do you write under a different name?
Well, let's just say I suffered a lot of rejection early on in my career.
The man who called his wife a money-grubbing cow on national television has changed and written a coming-of-age novel showing that he understands how women struggle. It's a brilliant commercial choice.
Amy, this is Brady Olinson. He was just about to leave.
Hi.
You may know him as Rex Stevens.
Oh, the River Gambler. I read that. Is that you?
You'll never know I'm here.
Like the time you were passed out in the bushes or the time you were naked in the pool.
And initially it was going to be, it's a three-part anthology with three different directors. The way it worked out is I ended up directing the first two segments, and then Jack directed the third segment.
Well, part of what makes She Loves Me Not such a fun project is that each chapter is in a different genre. So we go drama, thriller, romantic comedy, but it all follows the story arc of Brady Olinson, who's a formerly famous writer who's slowly sliding further and further into alcoholism. In terms of transitioning from one to the other, Brian and I sat down and worked out the basic story, and then we each took a run at it. So we sort of had what's the Kurosawa method of script writing. Do you know how Kurosawa collaborated? When Kurosawa would collaborate with people, he would write a version and his collaborator would write a version, and then one of them would sit down and edit those two versions together. And so that's kind of what we did. We would each write a version, give it to the other person, that person make changes, you'd get it back. I don't like what he did here, I'm changing it again. Da-da-da. And then in the end, come to conclusions of it should be like this, it should be like that.
Right, yeah. Elaborating on that, I think what happened was I wrote the first act of the film just to sort of just to break the ice, and we had known Jack came up with this great idea of how the second act should be with the publicist. I'm like, that's a really good turn of events for the story. So I wrote a very quick first act. I gave it to Jack, and I just said, okay, this is what I did, so you can build on this. And I pretty much just I was working in Michigan, and I was teaching a couple high school classes, so we were doing this all over the phone and Skype. And so that's sort of how that went. So after he wrote the second one, we put them together, and we each wrote the third one on our own. And then I think we traded at that point. We traded the third act.
We say that it's an anthology film, but it does follow the arc of Brady Olinson. And one of the things that I found fascinating about the end product is that they really do go together. You can't just lift one out and watch it. It's not like, Tales of the Crypt, where you could lift one story out and watch it, and it's great by itself. Each story is enriched by the one that preceded it. That was about the mockumentary?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we had one location. We had the location.
Originally, it was supposed to be a mockumentary, and it was supposed to be about a couple that buys a mansion, and the refurbishing of the mansion destroys their marriage. So Brian contacted me and said, "This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Come work with me on it because you're good at comedy." So I went and met with Brian, and I said, "You know what? I am good at comedy, and I don't want to talk myself out of a job, but I don't really like the mockumentary the mockumentary format because I feel like it's all over TV. It's sort of been done, and that setup is sort of the money pit with Shelley Long and Tom Hanks. I said, let's come up with something else and go back to the financer, to the executive producer, and pitch him a different idea. It all had to be in the house. It all had to be in this mansion. Right. And Brian said he always wanted to do an anthology film. And I said, well, the only anthologies that really sell well are horrors, and we don't really want to do a horror film because these people still have to live in the house. But so we tried to come up with something that people hadn't seen before that would be fun. So I thought it would be really fun to have sort of a Neapolitan film and do 3 different genres in one film. And one of the ways that worked to our advantage was in the process of writing it, we had to hit the guideposts of each genre pretty quickly. So it helped the film have a really great pace because you want to hit all those guideposts before you move on to the next genre. And then we had Paul Christo come in and do music when we were done. And the music, he's an incredible composer. And his music really drives home the feeling of each different genre. So when you see it, it really is one story arc where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So anthology, I don't know, we need a new word beyond anthology.
And that's why Cary Elwes was so interested, because he said, I've never seen something quite like this. And I think that's initially what made him so interested. I've been fortunate to have a great casting director named Emily Schweber, who's cast all my features, and we just do the whole list version. We make a list, and we kind of go down the list. But for this project, Cary Elwes was my first choice.
So we were really fortunate that Joey read it and signed on to do it, because I just felt like she's a really great comedic actress, and people need to see what an awesome comedic actress she could be.
She was the first person cast.
She was the first person cast, and then we went out to Lisa Edelstein, and Lisa and Joey knew each other and had never worked together, but always wanted to. So Lisa was like, "Yeah, that sounds great." And Joey and Cary had shot a pilot together a couple of years ago. And didn't you say it was every woman that we went out to with a part said yes?
They said yes, pending scheduling. So
right.
Some of them fell out. Yeah.
Right, which is kind of interesting and unique. Like the female characters in this movie are very strong, and I don't think they're really typical of female characters you'd see in a film written by 2 guys.
The consistency of tone, the consistency of pacing, tone, editing, and I think what helped us was that we had the same director of photography for all 3 segments. Once I got in there, this is again a guy that I've been working with for a very long time, named Ryan Samuel, that I went to film school with. Once we shot the first segment, we got into a rhythm. Even though each segment has a different look, a lot of the coverage seemed to be fluid and fit together. And so by the time we got to Jack's segment, fortunately everybody had been there for 10 days working together. So it was just kind of a pretty good transition, I think. And having the same camera guy, having Cary Elwes, of course, to carry each part, kept everything very concise and consistent, and ended up working. Do you want to elaborate on that? Because
sure.
You kind of came in.
Because we as well as Ryan providing us some consistency throughout, but also changing the lighting from genre to genre.
Yeah, I mean...
which helps because each genre has its own look as well as its own style of writing and music. The other thing that helped was we had C.J. Miller doing our data collection because we were shooting on a Red Epic, and so C.J. did our data collection and maintenance, and then he was the editor of the film when we were finished.
So along with me.
Along with you. So Brian did an edit on the first act and the second act, and I sat down with CJ and worked through an edit of the third act.
Yeah, and speaking of CJ, he had never cut a feature before, and we were so impressed with his work on set and just how easy he was to work with. And I knew I was going to have my hands full cutting the first 2 segments, and I just called CJ and said, hey, why don't you go ahead and take a shot at the 3rd segment? I was so impressed with CJ's work and the work he did with Jack, I gave him my 2 segments that I had already cut. I said, I need a third, an outside perspective on this, because you seem to have really did something really magical with Jack's segment. I didn't even watch his dailies. I directed my first 2 segments, went through my dailies. I didn't watch his, so I wanted to be. It was completely in Jack's hands. So I was completely no interference with what he was doing. I said, here, make your 30-minute thing. I mean, would that pretty fair to say? And that's a very good question. What I've done differently and taken advantage of, I can tell you the biggest thing for me is the switch from film to digital. My first 2 features were shot on film, and then as that whole trend started to happen and all these new cameras came out, the RAW format, I made that transition. I hope one day to go back to film, but with the way how difficult it is to raise money, that we'll see. Other than that, just I've become a lot more invested in social networking, which is something I really never, it never really excited me through my first 2 or 3 features. I just couldn't grasp that you could successfully promote a movie through the internet and create interest and buzz. That didn't mean anything to me. I was looking at all these bigger films and like, they don't, these other directors who I admire, they're not on Facebook telling people to go see their movie. Why do I have to do it? Well, the answer is because I'm not them. I'm me, and I have to get myself out there. So you probably have something to add to that too,
On the social media,
or what you've done differently.
Well, on the first film that I did, the film had its own website. I don't think anybody goes there. So we felt like with She Loves Me Not, we'll have the Facebook page. We'll cultivate the Facebook page. You can see the trailer on the Facebook page. To have a website just for the film itself, I'm not sure how that helps anymore, because you can't monitor traffic on it. It's hard to respond to people on it. On Facebook, you can actually have a dialogue with people during the film with the people you want to have a dialogue with. And I think, my first film was a documentary, and it took a little over a year to make. And so this film was like, it took us a year to make, but we only shot for 13 days. My documentary, I kept shooting at different points. The other times I was like, oh my God, this is so great. All our shooting is done in 13 days. Now I can go sculpt it and play with it. So I would do a doc again, but it's really hard. Financing those is very, very difficult. But we both have scripts we want to do. We each have our own scripts that we want to produce for future projects. And I think as a writer, director, producer in future projects, I'll probably let myself be more of a control freak.
I will continue to be a control freak. To be honest with you.
It's a necessity.
Yeah, you have to. I mean,
yeah.
I'm very tenacious, and that's the only reason I've been able to make low-budget movies, is because it's all or nothing for me. Filmmaking is my whole livelihood, and you have to get angry enough to make a movie. There's nothing. You have to be so impassioned, so obsessed with making the story you want to make, even when you're a gun for hire, because it's just so difficult. Have I ever worked on something I was not enthused with? I get enthusiastic about everything. I mean, you have to go into it, even if you don't like the material or subject matter. It's not like I've been on a lot of gigs for hire or big gigs for hire, because I haven't. I've been on smaller gigs for hire, and you have to figure out something that you can bring to the table. And I have had opportunities that I have said no to because I really felt at the end of the day I just could not bring anything to the table. As a human being, as a director, as a creator, I just couldn't. It wasn't, and I couldn't do it. So
there's lots of in the film world, there's lots of people who are fans of films. There are lots of people who are making money off of films without ever working on a film. And so I see stuff like on the the movie phone has their 6-second review, right? Blah, 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 don't go, or blah, 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 it's bad. It's like, how do you in 6 seconds dismiss someone else's 2 to 3 years of work? Like, how? That is the epitome of ultimate evil. Like, everything that I like, projects. If I'm going to work on a project, I'm going to bring everything that I have, everything that I can do to make that project as good as possible. because there's not much you can do that's harder than trying to make a feature film without much money. You know, there's an interesting equation. I don't know what it's called. I'm sure there's a name for it, but we are a media consuming culture. We consume mass quantities of media. When we make it easier to consume, there has to be more of it to consume. But the cost supposedly has to go down in order for production to expand, for there to be enough for people to consume. But the problem is, it takes the same amount of, whether it takes me 3 hours to make you a cake or 4 hours to make you a cake, you're still going to eat it in 5 minutes. So I think there's a big problem with the rate of consumption surpassing the rate of production, and it's sort of, part of it is it's flooding the market with stuff that's not that great, because the machine has to be fed, the machine needs content, but it's also watering down a lot of the content in general. Everything seems to be a matter of taste. So I don't know, when I see a bad film, which, you know, obviously we see a lot of, I try to see as much as I can. So I'm seeing a lot of bad movies. One in particular comes to mind that Brian liked and I hated. Was it's Pain and Gain.
Well, yeah.
I hated that movie. But seeing a movie like that makes me want to go make movies. I feel like I could do so much better with half the money and more respect for the audience, you know? But when I see a really great movie, I feel really great about that. I think, God, I wish I had made that, or I wish I could make something that good. I'm not sure I'm appropriately answering the question about consumption. People are doing binge viewing right now, which is really providing a renaissance within the realm of television, because people will watch all 16 episodes of whatever Netflix is releasing this month. You know, we try to go make a movie. It took us almost a year to make our movie. It's 90 minutes long. People are going to watch it in 90 minutes, and maybe there'll be a 6-second review or whatever. But our amount of effort and our amount of skill is sort of, I don't know. It tends to feel like it gets minimized with the increase in rate of consumption. There's an incredibly ridiculous, long-winded response.
No, that was actually a very good response.
You know,
several levels of it. So
in a microcosm, the same thing sort of happens with comic books, because I used to be an avid comic book reader, and thanks to my iPad, I've gone back to reading more comics. But I've noticed when you're reading them digitally, you read them faster than if you're holding them in your hand. And so that's another medium where you're talking about the rate of consumption increasing because the mode of delivery has gotten easier. And so, are there going to be more comics? No, who knows? I don't know what the situation is there. But I think it's a problem for which I'm not sure what the solution is yet. Some of the differences between independent film and what Hollywood is doing is Hollywood has the money to make Drek look really great. And yes, there are lots of people that can go out and make a film for not much money right now. You can go shoot something for not much money. But sometimes the difference between a good independent film and a bad independent film is the post-production work, is the quality of the post-production. So, and post-production is sort of a constant cost. Like, no matter what you shot your film for, you're going to end up spending between $40,000 to $50,000 just on post-production. And in
this budget range, my experience with Dance with the Films has been really fun, and they're a very proactive film festival, and going through all these independent films, combing through a bunch of movies, and they really have provided a great platform for us to premiere, and for that I'm really grateful. The team is great, they're very hands-on, and then we have a great venue. So in all honesty, I'm very happy.
Yeah, they've been really terrific. They are true supporters of independent film. Because there's no backdoor studio deals at Dances with Films. They're really promoting independent filmmakers who are out there trying to push their films, up against the onslaught of the Hollywood deluge.